point, I'm going to be responding to a message that came in via Facebook at the Brian James Shanley Raw page. Not the Sovereign Grace Institute of Apologetics, but Brian James Shanley Raw. So, and the reason my response is not timely is, first of all, the person's English was so terrible, I thought the author was foreign. It turns out that they were American-born, they just can't spell or punctuate or construct a sentence to save their life, which seems to, with the millennial kids, and especially these Generation Zs, they think that language and grammar are arbitrary and cultural and stuff like that, and I refuse to recognize the absolutes of the English language because my speech doesn't have to conform to that and stay in those boundaries and blah, blah. Dude, learn how to write, okay? Learn how to spell, all right? When I was a kid, we had to write. We didn't have computers that had spell check. We had to literally take a pen and put it on paper and write. And if we're trying to talk to a girl and write her a note, we better know how to write a sentence, you know what I mean? Today, kids abbreviate stuff, and it's just, this was atrocious. But that's one reason why my response is not timely. The other one is that it required me to follow up and ask a clarifying question to the author of it because I didn't understand what they were asking. The person was asking me to further expound on what he calls my Rick James moment. I'm like, what have I ever said or done that would possibly make somebody think that could possibly compare me to Rick James? You know what I mean? I have tremendous respect for his work as an artist and even as an actor in the Eddie Murphy movie Life. You don't know he played Spanky Johnson or Bumpy Johnson or whatever. And it was a good acting job. So I don't know why I was compared to it, so I had to respond and say, what is he talking about? See, when you're a public speaker, particularly a heralder and proclaimer of the Christian gospel message of the death, the burial, and the resurrection of God the Son, Jesus of Nazareth, sometimes to illustrate a point, you will take a biographical, historical account from your personal life as an illustration, you know what I mean? To try to make it relatable. A greater point, you're trying to bring it home, you know what I mean? Take some of the hay from the upper part of the barn and bring it down to where the animals are eating it. No, I'm not comparing people to animals. Don't get all upset. So you've got to take complicated stuff and make it plain. Some of the old preachers, make it plain, Sean, make it plain. You know, I've got to make it plain sometimes. And so it requires telling a story. And sometimes I'll allude to a story and only tell the part that's relevant to the point that I'm trying to make. And then saying something to the effect of, but that's a story for another time. And then moving on with the overall message. You see, people's attention spans are very short nowadays. And you can only circle the hangar for so long before eventually you bring the sucker in for a landing and try to make some kind of sense. So I knew that about my audience that day, and I mentioned something in passing and said, there's something to the effect of there's a deeper story behind it, but that's for another time. So apparently the author of this message to my Brian James Shanley Raw was in the audience the day that I said that's a story for another time, and wants to hear the story of what he calls my Rick James moment, okay? And so now that I've asked him what he's talking about, I can tell the story. There's a time where Rick James was at the music awards of some kind, and he says, and to the lady that was in the back, let me make it perfectly clear, never mind who you thought I was, I'm Rick James, bitch. So that's what he's talking about, but I've never taken a mic and said, I'm Brian Shanley, bitch. The closest thing that I can ever think of was, it was 2002 at the earliest, but 2004 at the absolute latest. It cannot be beyond 2004. So in this time, my daughter, Gabrielle, who's born in 1998, 2002 puts her at 4 years old. 2004 puts her at 6. Either way, she's itty bitty, okay? And I am booked to speak at a church in St. Paul at this time. I'm a substitute for whoever couldn't make it, so I'm honored to be the choice number 2, but whatever. You put on the full armor of God, and you don't turn down a chance to tell the truth. So I accepted it. It was in St. Paul, and the first century Christian church on the Lord's Day, the first day of the week, Sunday, at the time the sun rises, they're up before breakfast singing hymns of praise to Jesus as Yahweh and Messiah. They're gathered and they're doing it. And it could cost them their life, but they don't care because they're so grateful to celebrate the fact that the tomb was empty. You know what I mean? So that's how the Christian church has historically been. I guess in 2002, 2003, we couldn't pay the Christian church in America to be up before noon. So this was a worship service that it was a night service, I guess, to the rest of the world, but to them it was when their church started. It was literally like at 3 p.m. or something. So if the sun comes up and your church doesn't start till 3 p.m., what are you doing that's more important? I don't understand it, but there's some churches that start at noon. And this was not the church. This was Jimmy the Reverend or Jimmy the Bishop or Jimmy the Elder and his 7 members renting out someone else's sanctuary. So I guess they might have had to work around someone else's schedule. So I showed up in St. Paul, okay? My daughter, like I said, is anywhere between 4 and 6. We'll say 5 just for the story. She says, "Daddy, I have to go to the bathroom." And I said, "Okay, my little girl has to go to the bathroom." She's old enough to go to the bathroom on her own, but are you going to send your little 5-year-old daughter to the bathroom alone? Probably not. So I stand outside of the bathroom for security reasons to make, to make sure my daughter's done and stuff and everything's fine. And some jackass comes up to me, doesn't ask me any questions, doesn't know me from Adam, definitely doesn't know that I'm the keynote speaker for the night. I'm anonymous. He doesn't ask me anything. He says, "You can't stand there." He's not asking me questions. He's literally telling me something. I turned around and looked behind me to see, is there a person standing behind me that he's talking to like that? No, this dude is talking to me. He's telling me that I can't wait for my daughter to get done with the bathroom. He's basically casting me as some pervert who thinks that hanging outside a lady's bathroom is some kind of exciting thing. No, I've got better stuff to do than hang out in front of a bathroom. So I said, "What is your name? What is your position? And who are you? Because on what basis are you speaking to me like this and telling me what I can and can't do?" He goes on to say, "I'm Deacon whatever." So, and he's looking at the ceiling the whole time with his nose in the air. And I'm like, is there something on the ceiling that he sees? Is there a stain? No, he's got his nose in the air because he thinks he's running stuff. His concept of a deacon is that the deacons are in charge and there's a position of authority here. If you look at Acts chapter 6, the office of the diaconon was created specifically because the shepherd, the male shepherd of the congregation, should not have to wait on tables. He should not have to do grunt work and labor because he should be laboring at the word, and he should be showing up to shepherd the sheep, to counsel the marriages, and to visit the people in the hospital. He should be freed up to do the shepherding job and the equipping job, and the grunt work should be left to a servant. That's what the office of the deacon was for. It's a humble servant. This was an arrogant dude who thought he was running stuff because his concept of church politics was so screwed up. And so I just simply said, "Look, I'm I'm standing here waiting for my daughter. I'm not moving. I'm going to continue to wait for my daughter. And if you have a problem with that, then why don't you notify someone in charge and have them come in and deal with me? He put his hands in the air and said, "My man," and walked away. And so my daughter gets done. Everything's fine. And then the worship service begins. I'm sitting in the General Assembly because they don't have a pulpit where you're looking down at the people. So I just look like I'm mixed in with the crowd. And then the MC takes the mic after the prayer and the praise and the songs and says, "Well, we have a tremendous guest speaker tonight coming all the way from Brooklyn Park." Keep in mind, I'm in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I came from Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. I don't know why he said all the way from, like I made some tremendous journey. I didn't. So it says, "It's Minister Reverend Dr. Brian James Shanley, blah, 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 blah." And there's applause and everyone's looking around. And as I'm making my way through the audience, this deacon who thought that Christ would be most magnified and God would be most glorified by interfering with my right to wait for my daughter to go to the bathroom, saw me take the mic, and he put his hands over his face with a palm and was so embarrassed that he was turning all colors. And I did put the knife in, and I did twist it a little bit. I didn't say, "Never mind who you thought I was, the guy backstage. I'm Brian Shanley, bitch." I didn't do all of that. But I just said, "Yeah, usually when I travel and speak somewhere, I get treated pretty good. But here I had someone literally tell me I couldn't wait for my daughter to get out of the bathroom." I didn't mention him by name. And the crowd started clapping and laughing like, "Woo, what kind of idiot did you run into?" "Oh, just one of your deacons who thinks he's running stuff." And so I went on to speak. I don't know whatever became of that little church that meets when the day is half over and rents out someone else's building. But I've never worked with them again on anything, and it's been a lot of years since. But that was my moment where, I guess as a teachable moment, I can tell everyone, be very careful who you treat like dirt. You know what I mean? He thought I was a guy from the street who walked in and he didn't know that I was the keynote speaker, and I was there to address a literal issue that church was facing from the scriptures. And so he never apologized. He never did anything. I did the old Irish exit where I disappeared and nobody knew I was really gone because they were shaking hands and stuff. But yeah, that's the story of what this questioner says was, "Tell us about your Rick James moment." That was it. I had a guy mistreat me, and then I was given a microphone, and I got to make him feel terrible for it. So, all right, this was a long time ago. I don't know what entertainment you got out of that story, but hope you enjoyed it.